Hi, everybody. I'm Ken. I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Ken.
And I got the pleasure to introduce our next speaker.
Can't hear ya.
Get closer.
Is it on?
Yep.
Oh, okay. I got the pleasure of introducing the next speaker. He just asked me this morning, so I didn't have time to make any lies up about him.
They know the truth anyway.
I'm pretty good at making lies up. But I know that Norfolk has good sobriety because Tom sobered up here a few years ago in Norfolk. And then he moved back to his home state in California and lived for a while. And then he moved back to Nebraska because he missed the tornadoes in our winter. He just couldn't take that warm sand between his toes, so he wanted to get back here where the weather's nice. So Tom takes this program to heart. He's always reaching out to help people, especially when newcomers come into our meeting. He's there to help them get on the right track and have a good sobriety like he has too. So I'd like to introduce Tom L. from Omaha.
Ken just loves to entertain and speak in front of people almost as much as I do. I've only had a year to prepare for this, but it's kind of like doing the taxes, which were due at the same time. So I had to do both in conjunction almost at the same time, because that's what alcoholics do, you know. The bag, I've got some kazoos and some balloons for if you get bored. There's earplugs in there for the rest of you, so let me know if you need. I'm Tom, and I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Tom.
My sobriety date is October 7th, 1994. That's no big deal in and of itself. What is a big deal is this day, this coming around of things. In 2000 or around that era, late 1900s, late 1990s, I, as Ken said, was playing around with the fact of getting sober, the process of getting sober. I sobered up for a couple of years while I was still living in California. I'm a native of California, Southern California, La Mirada, California to be specific. And after 25 years of drinking and drugging with my primary thing of choice, psychedelic drugs, tempered with alcohol because they got me down onto my feet and on back the face of the earth a little bit smoother than just the psychedelics by themselves. I decided that 25 years of drinking and drugging probably weren't fitting in with me being not only a family man, but a father in particular. So I sobered up, as we all do, or a lot of us do at any rate, for not the purposes of me being sober, but because of the effects of not being able to go on doing the things that we were doing and not being able to stop the things that we were doing. And thank God for that. Now, the California version of sobriety, which isn't any different than out here, except we don't clap out here after everybody's speaker and everything at a share meeting. There are very, very minor differences. The major differences are when you hear the people on the West Coast talk about the people in the Midwest, and the people in the East Coast talk about the people on the West Coast as if they're a different breed or something else. You know, they don't do that kind of stuff out there. It's a bunch of malarkey. People are people, I suspect, wherever you go, and the program is the program. And thank God for that. Thank God as you understanding, which was key, still is key to my sobriety, for that. And that in and of itself was a very contentious idea, but more about that in a little bit. I need to get my phone out because I am one of those that can go on and on and on and go, oh, look at that. And sometimes I'm going on and on and on about things that matter and are of import. So we'll see how far I get. All right, we're set. Thanks to John, the previous speaker, great story. We go through a lot of turmoil. Mine was, my life up to the point of getting sober was not quite as tumultuous. I'd really, really, really like to thank Ken and his wife Jamie, the significant others. Ken is my sponsor, and primarily the attraction with me to him as a sponsor was his wife. Not to get to Ken, but because she put up with Ken. And they play off of each other in a very good way. And I thought, man, they got something that I really, really admire. And if you can be in a one-on-one relation with another person on that level and everything, and be what they are, not only to themselves, but to their program and others around them, then you got something. I want it. So thank you for being my sponsor. And Jamie, thank you too. Jamie just recently had surgery, so I was trying to push back, but she's got a hard head. I can't. Anyway, thank you for that. Thanks to Russ and the committee. I would suppose close to 30 years ago, probably 28 years ago, I got the opportunity of running or working on the classic service board as far as putting these things together, so I know what's behind a lot of that. One year I remember, that was 2001, I believe. Mel Barger, a very important AA historian, who's written, he helped write Pass It On, but then he's written a lot of grapevine material too, and some books about AA, very good books, New Wine, book about Ebby, and quite a bit. So if you're not familiar with that name, look it up. And he's got some good speeches, some good history has been done and recorded. I got to talk to the man who knew the man and the man who shook the man's hand, Bill Wilson. This thing isn't very old, you know. We get to take a picture of a broader perspective as members in AA, and if you get into the history of it, it's amazing. Now, if you get into the biblical history, you're looking at how many millennia ago, 3,000 years ago, that the smartest guy on earth put into the Bible in wisdom a perfect description of an alcoholic, and it goes on with the bleary eye, the wavering of spirit, and all these, the finer qualities of being an alcoholic. You know, it's quite a long passage. And at the end of it, he says, why do they do all this stuff? They wake up and they don't know where they've been. They don't know who they slept with. And then they do it again. You know, why? I don't know. This is the wisest guy at the time in the Bible, you know, saying that he didn't know. So it's been going on for a few years. And all of a sudden, these two guys get together in the middle of America and do this thing that they didn't know if it was going to work, but they tried everything else, and each of them were at the end of their road, as far as Bill on the edge of being proclaimed a wet brain and having to be confined for the rest of his life. And then Dr. Bob, pretty much being in the same position, not being able to pursue his medical practice or anything. But at any rate, they got together and found that they had shared experience and that there was a way out by being part of each other, and carried that on into an unbelievable program that's worldwide. You know, we were talking about that, Tom and I were just a few minutes ago, as far as we get something that we can take anywhere, and we have a family, not just around from county to county or state to state, but worldwide. And I hear reports, I've never been international and been to a meeting, but I hear reports from other people talking about, wow, that was a highlight of my vacation kind of stuff. Where do you get that from? Where do you get that feel that you could be an assist to somebody else that is bereft of life, that doesn't know how to go on, that doesn't know how to stop, that hasn't been able to do anything about this thing that's taken them down and making them miserable in the process? Where do you get any other opportunity to say, hey, you got a minute? And be able to extend your hand when anyone anywhere reaches out. I want the hand of what we've learned to be there. You couldn't have told me that that would be a profession, something that I'd be part of when I was younger. I wouldn't have understood it. I would have said, sign me up. And probably how much does it pay? You know, the answer to the pay one would be pretty easy. It'll pay you riches beyond anything you could ever imagine, because that's what I've got today, a life that I get to do things that I don't want to do like this, but be able to talk earnestly about it and say, hey, you're going to have a life if you stick with it and you work this program, not just stay sober, but work what's before you. You'll have a life that you'll not only be able to recognize and be able to speak truth to, but be able to share that with another person. You know, that's just not in the curriculum at any of the schools or colleges or anything really, or seminaries, I suppose. That might approach it. But we're not about salvation from the outside. We're about spirituality from the inside. And this is what we get on a very, very detailed level. So anyway, as I said, I spent 10 years with drugs. When I was 16 years old, I heard about all this stuff. This is back in, 68? So you got to put yourself in that time frame. There's a lot of psychedelic drugs, a lot of hippies, especially where I'm at in the West Coast and everything. I don't know if this has anything to do with it, but I had a butch haircut at the time, and I had butch haircuts with butch wax and everything else from the age of about 5 on. To where I could say, F you, I'm growing my hair long, and put away that stinky wax thing that I'm always smelling like paraffin with, and growing my hair long. You know, now I've had jobs when I was in my residence in Norfolk and everything for 12 years, back from 92 to 2004. I did have shorter hair because I was working in the field of automotive mechanics and all that. It's kind of hard to have long hair and be doing that kind of work. So at any rate, that was something that I studied about as far as before I was going to take a trip. I wanted to know where I was going, so I read Hoffer and Osmond and all these doctors and psychiatrists and everything that were playing around with psychedelics as a spiritual relief therapy for mental illnesses primarily, and got the idea of what it would be like to take a trip. And just like I did with the big book and so many things, I read about it and thought I knew all about it. So at 16 years old, I got and popped some pills with my parents. Well, not with my parents, but when my parents were there. We were in a cabin up in Big Bear Lake, California. And I was at the bottom of a swimming pool doing somersaults, looking up at the trees, the towering pines that were over the sides of the swimming pool, and thinking, oh, how cool. This feels like a funeral or something. And this is my spiritual death and awakening and all. And it was a trip, no doubt about it. But I was lucky to survive that too. Now, if my parents would have known that, get your ass out of that pool. I don't know what they were thinking. But they weren't real aware as far as what was going on in little Tommy's life, I don't think. I mean, your eyes get dilated, you're just laughing. I remember being in the shower and we were deciding on what to eat. I'm not thinking about food or being hungry as the last proposition in my mind, but I know it's probably about time for the earthlings to eat, so I'm gonna go along and try to play along and keep it cool. So I'm in the shower and I'm hearing the discussion about the dinner and everything, and I just yelled out when it was said, where do y'all want to go eat? I said, Jack in the Box, and that was the funniest thing, right? I hear y'all laughing. It was to me. I just started laughing my ass off, and the night was on. We went to a bakery in downtown Big Bear, and not a bakery, but it was a Swiss or a Swiss chalet, so that's probably Swiss, restaurant, and they had a bakery case with, of all things, you wouldn't believe it, breathing brownies sitting at the window of the case, and we're sitting right by it, and I'm watching those brownies breathe, and I'm wanting to say, you guys see that? Things like that, just, it was everything I could do just to not get busted. And I just don't know how that happened, but I did. I had a great time. I really did. It was very assuring. It was the experience that I'd read about and studied about and everything, and there was a spiritual connection. Now, I was raised Catholic, so I had that part of it and everything. I didn't like the exercises of Catholics, especially the nuns poking holes with the chalk in the chalkboard and everything, talking about sin, and this is venial sin, and making little dots on my heart to explain that. This is mortal sin, and just pulverizing the chalk with dust falling all over and everything. And I'm grabbing my heart, that's mortal sin, and you can't get rid of that. These kind of things just were traumatic for me. So I didn't get a real good idea of what God was on a personal level until I had this experience on the spiritual level and everything, and then tucked that away. Now they say that it's not addictive. No, there's nothing to an alcoholic or a person like me that isn't addictive or can't be as a possibility, so I don't buy that one. I took so much I didn't know I was high at a lot of points, but that continued on for about 9 years or so, to where I really got into the alcohol because it was augmenting the effects of the psychedelics, plus it was time to grow up a little bit more and not just be a truck driver or things that you can kind of skirt away with those things. Yeah, you heard me. You can really skirt away with things like getting high and going on the road real well. It leads to some interesting things, like walking in at the interstate line with a logbook to check in the commercial licenses and everything, and walking into the trooper's side of the room and wonder, what the hell, am I in trouble here or something? And then all the troopers looking at me, other's right, buddy, things like that. Rolling down the window, getting pulled over in Medford, Oregon, in the middle of winter, it's all snowy and cold outside, and getting pulled over because I hadn't stopped to have them check my commercial license for whatever reason, but the cloud of pot just coming out of the cab of the truck, and the officer being down. I suppose the only thing that saved me, he was down below me and everything, so the cloud must have gone up. But, the dope, the drugs, the everything else, the inebriation, but I got this, was there and part of that job. When I found that mechanics and a little more precision type work was a little more taxing to my insobriety, then I cut down and did it more appropriately with alcohol. So that there came the haircuts and the alcohol use as socially acceptable things that we became. That came up, like I said, for a total of about 25 years in my late 30s. In 1988, my wife and I, this is the tie-in for Nebraska. My wife was from Nebraska, She was out visiting on a trip to a cousin's wedding, and at the reception we caught an eye for each other and a little bit more, and continued on with the relationship, a long-distance relationship for about a year. Developed into, hey, you know, you wanna think about moving out here, and she did. So that was out to California, and then in '88 we had a daughter. We were married in '84. In '92, somewhere there around, 4 years of having a kid made me realize that 25 years of drinking and drugging and everything else were not allowing me to be the father that I should be. There was a guilt feeling there and a realization, and now it wasn't on a level of being quite the human that I could be or anything like that in and of myself, but at least there was some inspiration, let's call it, that this is not right on a big time level. So for once in my life, I talked to my doctor, who had been bugging me for a few years because I'm growing this bigger, not big, but bigger nose, redder nose, and puffy face and cheeks and everything, and much more red complexion than what I have today. And asking me, you know, well, you've got rosacea at the very least. One of the causes of that type of symptom can be alcohol, the W.C. Fields look. What's your alcohol intake? And for a few years, probably about 3 years or so, I got away with a prescription of tetracycline based upon, well, he doesn't drink that much to cause all that. You know, he says he only has 1 or 2 now and then, you know. Well, you know, doctors don't go to philosophy and psychology school, I don't think, on the level that I did. So 1 or 2, he didn't ask me how big the 1 or 2 was, you know, 1 or 2/5. Now and then, what the hell else is anybody can see on a clock? What else is there? There's just now and then, you know. So I had a good alibi is what I thought, you know. And if he can't figure it out, then I don't know what to tell you. You know, I was that smart. So there's no trauma or anything. I'm sorry to admit, especially after hearing John's story, there was nothing to drive me to feeling about myself the way that I felt. And the way that I felt from a kid on, from elementary school on, was restless, irritable, and discontent. And then, like I said, when I was, you know, in my teenage years, 13 to 16 or so, I started finding these little tools that other kids were using that kind of took the edge off of that, you know, and made it, if I didn't feel restless, irritable, and discontent, if there was an actual reason, all that I know is that taking a sip or taking a toke, it just kind of evaporated with that. Maybe it was still there, that reason for being restless, irritable, and discontent. Maybe being a redhead with big ears was acknowledged, and I was a freakish kind of guy, you know, way back then all along. I got a feeling it was an inside job, like what we talk about, in between my ears, and it just relieved that. And of course, more relief is better, you know, so you all know that. That's where we start and that's where we go. It wasn't until Alcoholics Anonymous, in the process of doing an inventory, especially with another human being, that I had some of these real deep, kind of offensive, but definitely personal questions asked. And observations made. The first one being that, you know, on that real existential level, you complain about your parents didn't love you. And it's not that they didn't love you. They just didn't love you the way that you wanted to be loved, you know? Things like that. You know what God isn't. You know, you've debated that. I used to be on the debate team and the speech team and everything, so that was part of the persona, the character, development that I got away with, thinking that somehow I was inferior, so I'll show them. I just baffled them with bullshit and dazzled them with my brilliance, you know. And, you know, that worked. That worked on levels that are amazing when I look back on it and everything, because there was one year that I ran for president of the school, and this was a big school out in California, high school, lost by a handful of votes, so somebody was voting for me. I wasn't, you know, packing the ballots or anything. And to be able to communicate and actually stand in front of people and bullshit them like I am now, or simply talk as I could try to now, is not something that everybody is capable of doing. So, you know, I diminish and demean myself still to this day in so many ways. But there's that push. You know, Bill talks about that a lot, with being, you know, the captain of his baseball team, on making a boomerang when his grandfather told him only an Australian can do that. You know, just about decapitating his grandpa to hear him tell it. With the success of his boomerang, that's the kind of stuff that alcoholics do. We overaccomplish to get something more that we think we need, that we probably don't, but it's just that not development of character in the good sense, but the adoption or the pushing, the making of character as in a Disney character kind of sense, to where, yeah, I'm just goofy or dopey, or, you know, I'm Snow White, you know, I'm Prince Valiant. On and on and on with the stuff that we can come up with to mask over what we think we're deficient in, at least from my part, you know. And I hear a lot of stories that kind of go along with that, so I'm assuming there may be a couple of you out there that can relate to that. That's the kind of stuff that I would do in my accomplishments in my life and everything. I was in the 18 to 25 year period. Again, this is back in the time of the Vietnam War and the turmoil in America. My brother enlisted in the Air Force and went into Air Force Intelligence based in Vietnam. I enlisted in the Peace Center of Santa Ana, California, Orange County chapter, where we were working for causes of peace and draft counseling, and basically to keep my ass out of the military. I was successful in that, again to the use of drugs, and being able to find enough whites to go on a diet and fail my first physical. I had a low enough draft number to where I was going to go. And then the second time came around and I couldn't find those drugs, so I just skipped out on the physical, which means you automatically pass. That was right towards the tail end of the war, to where I didn't go in or anything. It wasn't prosecuted for it. There is, you know, especially when I get around a guy like my sponsor, Ken, who served, there is some feelings of guilt about that still to this day. I didn't do anything illegal, except for the drugs. But you know, other than that, you know, when it comes down to it, you know, it was again taking care of Tom first, and not thinking about the consequences on a grander level. So at any rate, that process led to the attraction at the Peace Center of a little peace girl that was a secretary there. I was doing paralegal kind of work to help people that wanted to know what their rights and the law was as far as the draft and military regulations were, and to get advice, legal advice, to deal with those difficulties that they were having. There was nothing, I mean, our phones were tapped. We had visits by, well, I don't know if they were FBI people, but they were very official looking people that hung around watching us. There were some oddities going on, including up to the point of there was some Pentagon Papers. I don't know if you're familiar with the Pentagon Papers, but basically that's what brought the truth of the war to the attention of the rest of the world, that we were losing and we were covering it up. Released by Daniel Ellsberg. In my circle of people that I ran around with, I knew of some of these people that were in, Tony Russo for one, that got those papers out and got indicted and went through the courts and everything with that, which became a big case both on the West Coast and the East Coast as far as the war and its the papers release claimed by the government to be illegal, claimed by the people who did the alleged illegalities, that it was necessary for the conscience of the world, really, and I firmly believe that myself. But just as a tie-in with that level of things that were going on, it was an odd time. There were guns drawn at times. There were allegations of me being head of a drug ring at the Santa Ana Register at that time, I believe. It was an Orange County Register later. And I was fired from my job and then hired when I showed up the next day after the police had told my boss that, or the head of the register actually, that I was, what my allegations were that I was heading a drug ring out of the distribution side, the paper boys, the big delivery vans dropping off bundles of papers. We were allegedly going in and getting the kids high and selling them drugs and stuff. There was nothing to it. They released me on my own recognizance that night, and I showed up at work. The owner's looking at me like, "What are you doing here? We were told you were in the slammer and you're going to be in the slammer for a little while. You got fired." And my own immediate boss was with me and everything. He said, "Well, I think they might be a little mistaken." So anyway, the register, luckily at the hierarchy, were a very libertarian run place. And they said, "Well, that's not right." And they hired me. I was back driving the very same day that I was fired. But at any rate, like I said, guns were drawn, court cases were made, blah, blah, blah. I moved from conservative Orange County up to the Bay Area for a few months to avoid drug school or any kind of diversionary thing that was going on. They had all these allegations and claims that they'd seized all these drugs and everything in our apartment. All we had at the time were a couple of roaches. So who's going to say it's not my pot when they pull out, a couple of keys if they've got it? And I'm sure that they could have produced something like that. It wouldn't have been true. But at any rate, to make a very long story back to the point, again, skirting around and saving my own ass and everything. So I spent a few years up in the Bay Area, doing the Bay Area kind of things, and Bay Area was really cool at that time because it was a place where they were very much more tolerant of people and a diversity of people than they were in Orange County. But when I came back down to Orange County and everything, it was still the same place. The Bay Area was just a little bit too freakish for me, so I thought, enough of this stuff. Let's get back to hometown area and see what we can do. And thus into the marriage and everything else. I found my drinking buddy in the marriage, and that's one thing for sure. After I decided, and she did not, to get sober, it was very short-term sobriety at the first time I went into a treatment center. After telling the doctor that, I am an alcoholic and that one or two is this, and I drink all the time. He said, "Well, I've got something that I think will work for you because I've seen it work in my own family's life with my brother, and that's Alcoholics Anonymous, first of all. But primarily what I can write right now is a prescription for you to get into a treatment center." So I did that. I had to wait a week, of course, to get my plans together and everything, again, thinking about me. And those guys thinking, "No, we've got you, let's get you in, let's get you going here." rightfully so. But at any rate, I said, I'm not like other people. I'll be good for you for a little while. You know, what are you laughing at? It's true. That's how we are. So I got my suitcase packed and all my clothes and goodies and everything in the suitcase, which I couldn't bring in, and got dropped off for my own version of the treatment, which lasted 10 days. In that 10 days, I was able to read the big book. I can say that much, and I actually read it. And as I said before, once I read something, I knew it. I knew how it was and what I could do with it and everything. Yeah, right. The biggest thing was you guys came in. In my hospital PJs, I experienced my first AA meeting. These people that brought in a meeting, and it was probably about 10 people or so at the most at the meeting. But something clicked in my hospital PJs in listening to y'all, and that something was, wow, they know about this character thing. They know about I've been hiding. They know that there's something wrong here. And I'm not sure the specifics of it or anything, but they're not pointing their fingers at me. And they're not telling me I got to do anything. But they're telling me things like, we're here. And if you'll connect with us, you can have something that is beyond anything you can ever imagine, And as I look out today, I see, anyone under 40 is a youngster. So if I'm making an arbitrary thing, please understand. The younger faces. God, I hope you guys grasp it. I hope you can hear just a word or two of my crazy bullshit meander here and realize, that we're here together, and you have been and maybe are and will encounter things that not only have diverted you from a good life, but maybe made you feel guilty, maybe actually made you guilty legally. Whatever the reason that you're here, though, it's important to get in mind that there's somebody there that has been in your story that has a similar experience, or maybe just talks a line and talks in a way one-on-one with you that you can connect with. Because that's what worked for me, is that connection. And that's what I felt that night at the hospital. These people coming in for no apparent reason, I still can't figure that out. But, getting it, that there was something there. So I took my little train of sobriety out, got back going in again. I remember my wife came and picked me up. Man, I was so good that I had her stop at the first liquor store to go get, and she's looking at me in this whole process. You just got out of treatment. You're talking about being king of the hill, and what are you doing? So I get one can, a tall can of Coors, and I put it on the ground once I got outside, and I fucking stomped on that thing to prove that I was king over alcohol. What the fuck? Who does that? The only thing that I've heard that matches that on my thinking was years later and way into sobriety. This was actual sobriety, not just, this, ooh, I get it now. When I made the assessment and claim for quite a few years, actually, that, somebody could put a gun to my head and I wouldn't drink these days. Now, if I, for some reason, in the light of day or the middle of the night, somebody put a gun to my head and said, drink this, I'd drink it. That's how I am today. I'm not stupid, but, this is the kind of thinking that we go through sometimes, just crazy shit. You know what? Nobody ever said, what did you just say? Put a gun to your head. What? My head is a bad neighborhood, and I've been told not to go in there alone. And that's true, you know. I don't know if Stephen King has a head like that or what, but I don't like his stuff. It's too scary for me. So where I've got a version of it and where it comes from, I don't know, and I don't have to really. I do know that this thing works on a level that I never could have planned out. And back to that history of how it's written, what transpired in the early days of AA. Again, this is hands that shook the hand that I've met. This is less than 100 years that this stuff's been available. So it's just a brief blip in time that it's been working, but it works. It works. There's 2 million, according to our conservative estimates, there's 2 million of us suckers out there doing this thing, you know, on a hardcore, staying sober, accountable basis. This is like counting a herd of cats, though. You know, how do you come up with real statistics on alcoholism and recovery and everything? It's impossible. That's why there are no good statistics. But I know in my experience, in my real world experience these days, when I talk about recovery, when I say I can't go to that next week because I've got a meeting, and say, oh, what kind of meeting? You're retired. What kind of work do you do? And I'll say I'm in recovery. I don't want to be a promoter or a salesperson for AA. We're not meant to be that. But we can definitely talk. You know, we take that anonymity to be something that it's not a lot of times. And, you know, it talks about we don't use the name of AA as a personal representative of it or anything. It's basically on the level of press, radio, and film. I don't have too many reporters following. I don't think there's anybody here today. Anyway, you know, we take it almost to a paranoid level sometimes. I can talk about recovery till I'm blue in the face. And you know what people hear when you say recovery? Oh, you're a member of AA. You know, that's what they retort with a lot of times, you know. So you can talk safely about it, and you can talk freely about it these days for the 99% of the time. You think that would shut the conversation off. Oh, you're one of those, huh? But no, people are interested, you know, or they'll know somebody that can be interested. You know, I work with more than one very, very high-level professional people to where they're talking about their significant others or their employees or someone they know. I got a friend who's got a problem kind of thing, you know, and I don't need to know exactly what it is, but I can say confidently, if they ever want to talk about it, I'll be free and glad to talk with them, you know. That's all. And that one-on-one connection, I can do a lot better with that than standing up here and talking to y'all. Not that you're unfriendly. I see a lot of friendly faces and everything, and thank you for that. But, you know, it's something that is genuine because it's made me a real person. It's made me stop and look and hear those questions like, you know what, God isn't, but what is God? And your first thought's always negative. No, it's not. Don't tell me that, you know. Things that are just evident to people that know the game of alcoholism, but not so much other people, even doctors, you know. It's confounding to me the amount of doctors that I had to talk a doctor out of prescribing oxycodone for me at one point, about 10 or 15 years ago. I've got some problems with my crushed vertebrae in my neck. So it's a pain management deal. You know, and this is 15, 20 years ago. They would have had me on oxycodone and that kind of stuff at that point in time. Look out. Look out. You know, I ended up with ibuprofen, and I take very few of those. So, you know, wow, there's kind of a leap, kind of a disconnect there. And I luckily had a very alert nurse overhearing the conversation with the doctor and pulling me to the side before the prescription was written, saying, I thought you were telling us that you're an alcoholic. And I said, yeah. She said, I thought so. Well, Doc doesn't quite get it, I think. So we're going to just put you on ibuprofen. I said, that's just fine because I don't want to even start taking something that's going to be on that level. At any rate, don't assume that, you have to hold it back in, or that there are no appropriate times for what you carry, no matter where you are in your sobriety. If you're just recovering for a few days, if you're taking as a notion of a drying up weekend or whatever, and you're talking to your buddies and they're, come on, have a drink. You're all nice and jolly. We need you to party with us and everything. And all of a sudden, the party starts shutting down, or you start feeling at odds or whatever. Move the scene. Change the deal to where you can accommodate those kind of challenges that you're feeling. Because this thing is a life eater. It really is, and it'll get you before anything that you can possibly think of or not think of. Connect with another person in the program. Talk to them before you drink. That is so key to this whole deal, that connection, not perfection. I can't overemphasize that enough. I tell every person that I sponsor, before you drink, I want you to get on the phone and connect with somebody and talk to them and tell them what you're doing. Tell them what's going on. Maybe it's just intoxication by emotion. That happens too. We get overwhelmed. So talk it out, but before you drink, because after you drink, I can't talk. I know how that goes. I really do. I've tried, and it gets very, very frustrating, but maybe some of you are more skilled with that. But it just doesn't work for either party. At any rate, this whole thing just comes down to, as much as you want to put into this is what's going to be, I was misreading the clock here, sorry, is going to be what you get back out of it. So if you don't feel comfortable, if you don't like what I'm saying here, use those earplugs, go to the restroom, whatever. If you're at a meeting where something's bothering you, try to bear with it and get through it. There'll be times, as is now maybe, where you're bothered by somebody else and what they're saying or not saying. Try to get to that point to where I'm going to keep at the listening in, because that's what we do in recovery. We go a little bit further than just making these snap judgments. I'm getting bored. So am I, by the way. But at any rate, when I first got to the point and did the first step, that we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, and that our lives had become unmanageable, there was some real importance, not to the whole of the step, but an importance that I didn't see at the time. It started with a number 1. That's integral. That's very, very basic. And that word we. And when I started getting that, when I started feeling welcomed with what I was and what I brought to the meeting, as obtuse as I could be, and as either above or below what was going on being said, I started fitting in, just from what I just said, just putting up with it. Just, maybe I didn't hear that right. Maybe I just need to take a breath. Maybe I need to pull back and see that I'm powerless over alcohol. It's a pretty obvious thing. That's why I'm here. My life becoming unmanageable, well, kind of in certain parts. But then when I started working the step and seeing how far that I was going, and working with another person in particular, I started realizing that it's not just the drinking thing, especially the painful but true and essential to my sobriety and growth were the observations about, that first thought always being negative. That was so key. And my response was so immediate that it froze me. Actually, it unfroze me. It was kind of like that icy intellectual mountain that Bill talks about being faced with by Evie, where he first heard, you need to get your own personal idea of God. Because I responded right away, no, it's not. Nuh-uh. get over that negativity, give it a chance, you know, and the power, the talk of a power that's beyond me, you know, that came to believe, I came to, and I came to believe was so important, you know. I arrived at the meeting, I started getting sobriety, and then I started believing it could be a longer term sobriety than just for this day, just for this, maybe it wasn't so hard, maybe it could be even a lifetime. Then that started working on that level. When I brought my idea of God and what I didn't believe in God, I was allowed that, you know. And that was a big, long, hard fight in the history of Alcoholics Anonymous. There was an atheist, Jim B., that fought very hard with Bill and others as far as, you know, what about us atheists? What about us people that don't believe in God on the way? What about people that call it Allah? What about the Buddhist that doesn't use that word God? You know, what do you do with all that myriad of people that have different ideas, you know? Can they be accommodated? And it was found, yeah, why not? You know, this is about the drinking thing. The only requirement for membership is what? Used to be an honest desire to stop drinking. And then it was thought that, no, let's kick that word honest out of there. It might be too high a bar for an alcoholic to think anything honestly. So, you know, luckily at that time I had, you know, God bless 303. 303 still stands, right? That and the whole group of people, John D., Jim T., Mitch. I was hoping to see Mitch today, but, you know, things come up. At any rate, that is a history, a personal history, and an introduction to a history, because, again, these were the hands that shook the hand, that were around at the origins, almost, if not directly, of Alcoholics Anonymous. And John and his, I don't know how many of you might have known John, but he was a real inspiration. Have a good day unless you have other plans. You know? God, that pissed me off. Oh, jeez. You know, it went right along with go work with another alcoholic, you know. I thought he was just filled with my blah, 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 like y'all are getting ready for lunch and everything. And just wanting, okay, let's go get pizza now. Come on. It wasn't. He was giving me direction on exactly what to do. Take what you've got. You've got something that you haven't had before. You're sober how many days? How many months? How many years? Take that and go work it. Go work with another alcoholic that's in a position where you used to be, and you couldn't see your way up from down. You couldn't get your head out of your you-know-what. And talk to him and say, how you doing? You know, we can get this. We can get it together. Because you can't get it unless you're a weed, you know? And then the one that really, really got me, because he was always doing this, how you doing, John? Oh, just ducky. You know, and it's like, oh my God, this guy is so simple. What a force, what a lover, what a beautiful person that he was, you know. I got the simplicity of that still to this day in a little bit different character form. Thank you, Ken. But it's just as real. It's just as real, just in a little bit different way. So find your place in Alcoholics Anonymous and live it. You know, live it, because this is a life that none of us should have, first of all. The fact of life is something that we shouldn't have. The way of life and what we get and what we learn, I don't know if I really realize it. A lot of times, you know, at this age and everything, I don't know if that's not dementia. That I'm not really able to understand its fullness and everything, but it's overwhelming in a good way. You know, it's a miracle. It's a blessing that I've got something that I can say, hey, can I help you? And really mean it. Or how are you doing? You know, or I don't remember you, but I should, huh? You know, there's a lot of faces around here tonight that today that I'm feeling that with and everything. But the deal is that's what people do. And in the process of feeling that that's kind of a failure or a lacking, I realized, no, that's what we all do. You know, we're all wondering who that face is, that's why we wear name tags, maybe, I don't know. Just a thought. But, you know, getting through this human deal as a spiritual experience is tough until you start realizing that I am a spiritual being having a human experience. And then it starts making sense. You know, this thing we call reality. I watched this deal as mind-boggling. Years ago, I don't know if you caught on the internet or any of this, there was this deal about this dress that was posted, and the question was asked, what color is that dress? It seemed like half the people were saying it was gray and white, and the other half were saying it was red and orange. A totally different color with the same dress. Now, they did research on this and found that there's a process in the brain. I'm not going to get into describing it. I don't understand it myself, but I saw the stuff and looked for the, I'll think of the name of it. But at any rate, what it comes down to is they can put this color in front of your face, and it's not the color that another person sees. You know, the deception of perception is what it was called. It's on Nova or something like that. So as human beings, the basics, just a basic color can be that different. One of the scientists said, there is a reality. Don't worry, don't despair. It doesn't turn everything all topsy-turvy, just most of it. And he said, there is a reality. It's just that you don't see it. You know, what the fuck? What's that supposed to mean? What's that supposed to mean? You know, I don't know. It's like God is you don't understand it. But there is a God. There is a power. You know, I found that power in you all. Into the newer people, the younger people especially, because man, that's invigorating to see y'all here. You know, and I hope you stick with it, man, because if I could have a few more decades on my life, it'd be a little more intense, wouldn't it? But we get what we get, and we share what we can. You know, this is the deal with Alcoholics Anonymous. This is what I need. And I think what I need before the pizza goes cold is to say thanks for us. I hope some of this was intelligible to you and didn't upset you to get ready for that pizza or anything. But thank you all for being here.